Here is 5 things I don't want to see in Borderlands 4. But before we get into this video, be sure to sub to the channel if you want to stay up to date on all of the latest Borderlands 4 news. I'm trying to hit 60k by the end of the year, so hopefully we can achieve that. And without further ado, let's get into what I absolutely do not want to see in Borderlands 4. And starting at number 5, we have DLC skill trees prioritized over DLC Vault Hunters. Back in 2019 when Borderlands 3 released, Randy Pitchford was asked about DLC Vault Hunters. His answer was that the DLC Vault Hunters in Borderlands 2 didn't receive as much play as they wanted, which is why they would then go on to do DLC skill trees in Borderlands 3 instead. And then, before all of that even happened, we got, oh boy, are those DLC Vault Hunters? I think everybody knew it was clear from the get-go this was one major cop-out, and I really think that one of Borderlands 3's biggest missteps was not doing a full-on DLC Vault Hunter. While I fully understand that they maybe didn't want to do a full-on new Vault Hunter because of the amount of money, resources, and time it would take to pull it off, the idea of a 4th skill tree just does not hit the same as a brand new playthrough on a brand new character with a brand new backstory, the lore completed, the look completed, everything in between, including a brand new voice actor. It just doesn't hit the same. Something like a 4th skill tree in Borderlands 3 for me felt like it was just filler content to pad out the DLCs. And that doesn't mean that they weren't fun, but I would have rather just had a DLC Vault Hunter instead, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that, especially because these skill trees completely shifted the foundation of Borderlands 3. For example, Zane's 4th tree just became like the strongest thing ever, and Flak's 4th tree just straight up didn't work, and still does not work. It is actually paid content that does not work. This is obviously a very, very huge problem, and it serves to the biggest reason as to why I don't want these skill trees back. I think there would be a lot more pressure to fix an actual brand new Vault Hunter than there would one of 4 4th skill trees. But that's my number 5 spot, and now let's move on to number 4. And this is going to be a controversial one, but come on, I'm a controversial guy, how can I not do something like this? What I don't want to see in Borderlands 4 is level cap increases. I cannot stand level cap increases. Strap in, kids, because we're about to go on a mother fluffin' ride. So, for the record, I have an entire video on this if you want to check it out on the channel, and it all stemmed from Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and its many mishaps. Go figure. Basically, in a nutshell, level cap increases are seen as extra content and extra interaction, a way to get players back into the game, and it's also a form of FOMO as well. Now, I'm not saying that any of this is bad, however, level cap increases in particular do lead to bad things. For example, the game is balanced for its base level and its base level cap. This includes the balancing on weapons. Now, Gearbox does not have, in the active Borderlands games that we know about at least, a set scaling depending on endgame levels and base levels. And you might be asking, why is that such a big deal, Epic? Well, because it means that as it stands currently at base game, if I were to take a level 1 legendary and a level 50 legendary and compare how they perform comparatively, the gap is going to be a lot smaller between those end goals. However, if we now take that balancing and compare from 1 to 70, now, of course, the set balancing we had on that level 50 weapon needs to be upped in order to match that of level 70 enemies. It is a very complicated thing, so if you're not following what I'm saying here, don't worry. But in a nutshell, upping level caps leads to spiraling, downward by the way, balancing issues, and it always results in an arbitrary band-aid which really screws up balance in these games. There are ways to fix it, and I have spoken about those in the past, and maybe I'll make a video on it in the future as well. But whether or not Gearbox will in Borderlands 4, I do not know, and because of that, I want to avoid level cap increases entirely. There are other ways to bring players back to the game, like raid bosses in your DLC content, and let me tell you, level caps are not one of them, at least not for me. I don't like this idea of, hey, you just farmed an entire inventory full of loot, and guess what? We just upped the level cap by 2 levels, just 2 levels, but now you need to refarm everything. I think that is so poor. I think it's poor consumer practice, and I think it's bad game design. I didn't like it in Borderlands 3, definitely did not like it in Borderlands 2, and I don't want to see it return in Borderlands 4. Please keep the DLC and post-launch content original instead of just upping a number and forcing people to refarm everything, while in the meantime breaking balance completely. So, I'm sure the comments is an uproar after that, but if you're not, you can show me by leaving a like on the video. Okay, I'm a sellout. Now, coming in at number 3, this is going to be yet another controversial take, but I will give good reasoning for it. What I don't want to see in Borderlands 4 is the return of a specific piece of endgame content. Can you guess what it is? Put it in the comment section down below, and if you get it right, I'll give you a heart on your comment. Unless this video gets like 1,000 comments, then brother, you better just pray up. The thing that I don't want to see return in Borderlands 4 is the slaughters. Now, for those of you who aren't aware what slaughters are, they're basically a wave-based endgame mobbing horde mode thing, right? That's just like the easiest way to describe it. You go into a preset arena, it doesn't change, and you hit a button. You have to fight 5 waves of enemies, and then you complete a round. You have to do this 5 times, so 25 waves of enemies to do 5 rounds, and at the end there is a boss. I hate this gameplay. I think it is monotonous, I think it is boring, there's always a boss at the end with dedicated drops, and I think that's horrible quality of life to have to go and farm, and I think it makes mobbing stale, and in a looter shooter, I don't think feeding people thousands of enemies like this is the way to go about it. I think there's better, more innovative ways you can do the concept of a slaughter, and I don't see them doing it often. For example, Murderlin's Temple in Borderlands 2 I think was infinitely more creative than the Slaughter Shaft in Borderlands 3. And the Holodome in the pre-sequel I think was done way better than the Slaughter Shaft in Borderlands 3. But that doesn't mean that I liked it. I think slaughters are really boring gameplay, and I almost never enjoy having to do them. Now that doesn't mean that Gearbox can't prove me wrong, it just means that at a glance, if you were to ask me what I want to see not return from the endgame, it is slaughters. I know there are people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum who feel this way about Invincibles. I am not them people. This is how I feel about slaughters. I don't want them to come back. I think it is filler content that doesn't achieve anything. And that's a great way to segue into my number 2 pick. The number 2 thing on my list that I don't want to see return in Borderlands 4 is filler sections and bloat. I'll say that again for the people in the back, that is filler sections and bloat. But what do I mean by this? Epic, what are you yapping about? You've got some kind of PhD in yapaholics. Look, I think that Borderlands 3 is a very good game. It definitely had a rocky start, and there were definitely sections of Borderlands 3 that just weren't hitting at launch, but people warmed up to. But not me. I gotta be honest with you. There are just elements in Borderlands 3 that don't need to exist. I know I'm not talking about gun elements that you fire at enemies. I'm talking about just elements of the game that don't need to be in there. Whether that's story beats, certain boss mechanics, certain enemy mechanics, and more. A few examples is the biggest one, which I'll name first, Eden 6. That entire section did not need to appear in Borderlands 3. And I guess, look, if you want to keep Eden 6, that's great. I'll throw another example at you. Necrotafeo. The game could have just ended in the Great Vault. We could have just done a dual boss fight with Troy and Tyrene. Would have been absolutely fine. Those sections that were there to just pad out the story, it felt like, made the game an absolute slog, and it still is a slog to get through today. Also, something I'll bring up is the trials, the proving grounds, for example. While they are a lot better now, and they did receive a ton of changes, I can't be the only one who remembers before Borderlands 3 come out, the proving grounds being talked up like the next big thing for Borderlands Endgame, and when they came out, they were just glorified slaughters. They were just slaughters with less in there, but more to do, granted, which again, I'm team F the slaughters. But the point is, a lot of this stuff is just added in and doesn't really do a lot for the life cycle and the longevity of the game. It's just there to make it look like there's more game there, but in reality, a lot of it is just boring snooze fest content. And this doesn't just go for content, it extends to the items too. I don't want to see stuff like the binary operator, right? That little stupid arms race gun that is just so borderline useless. I don't want to see that. Give me actual good loot that I can go in and make cool builds with. I don't think I've seen more than 10 people use the binary operator for a build. And please do not hit me in the comments with epic it's useful at a low level, because if you do, honestly, I'll be surprised if you make it this long into the video, so if you do, fair play. Anyway, let's stop right there and let's move on to my number 1 spot. This has been a rocky video, but I gotta beat you up one more time before we leave, alright? Gotta stay on character here. The number 1 thing I don't want to see return in Borderlands 4. I'm laughing because I know this is gonna get a few people. Anointments. I do not like this system. I don't think I will ever like this system. I have batted around different concepts with anointments in the past. In fact, in Wonderlands Redux, I don't know if you heard of it, I even reworked enchantments, aka anointments, so that they were better. And while I did make some stuff which I'm very happy with, and I do find them very fun to use, I would prefer it if anointments were not in Borderlands. I don't think it works very well at all. I even batted around a concept of turning it into a gem slotting situation like in PoE, for example, and even that, I just don't think we need it. I think there's so many better things we could do. For example, like chuck anoints and bring back the idea of set bonuses. I think that would be way cooler. I'd rather have manufacturer-based set bonuses. I'd rather have stuff like weapon proficiency back, which I know is a controversial one for people. I think I would honestly take anything over anointments. If you were there when anointments were first introduced in Borderlands 3, aka at launch, you'll know that it became a nightmare to farm certain things because of how crowded the pool was. And I know, hi K6 by the way, you're in the comments being like, there should be less anointments. Hey, I gotta tell you pal, I don't care. I hate anointments and I don't want to see them in Borderlands 4. Now, I gotta be honest, is it a deal breaker for me if they're in Borderlands 4? No, I don't think so, because let's face it, I'm just gonna make an overhaul mod in the first couple of months of the game that completely reworks them or removes them if people want that. So, it's not really an issue that affects me. But just because it's not an me doesn't mean it's not an issue. And I think it's an issue. And I would like to see them removed from Borderlands 4. I don't want to see it. And devs, if you're watching, just know I mean it with love. But respectfully, fuck anointments. But without a doubt, that's going to do it for my video on the top 5 things I don't want to see in Borderlands 4. Gamers, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, because anytime there is Borderlands 4 news, we're going to be posting it right here. I'm going to be gooning. I'm going to be gooning. Is that weird to say? Alright, that's going to do it for the video, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Take it easy.